There's a very specific kind of purchase that everyone makes at some point in their life. It's expensive, it feels important, and for about a week, you're convinced it's gonna change everything. And then it just sits there, unused, judging you, until eventually you either ignore it or you destroy it.
I don't even know how to use it. I don't even know why we need it. I just know I want it. You know, like when we had the kids.
All right, so this episode is basically built around one very simple idea. What happens when you buy something you don't need, don't understand, and definitely can't afford? And what's funny is, even though this is about a computer in the late 80s, this is one of the most relatable setups the show has done. Because everyone has that thing. The purchase that felt like a great idea at the time, and then immediately turned into, why did I do this? And what the episode does is it takes that idea and filters it through the Bundys. So instead of just being mildly irresponsible, it becomes completely irresponsible. Instead of just not using it as much as you'd like, nobody uses it at all. And instead of just regretting the purchase, Al ends up in a full-blown psychological battle with the computer. And so with that in mind, welcome back to The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be ranking the 20th episode of the third season of Married with Children, titled The Computer Show, written by Ralph Farquhar and directed by Jerry Cohen. All right, let's see how this one stacks up, starting with the episode overview. So for the second straight episode, we're going to open the episode overhearing a TV program that Al's watching. In this case, it's Rin Tin Tin. But right away, though, we're going to get an idea of what this episode is going to be like, as we get a very obvious Peggy is lazy joke. And this type of joking is going to be a very running theme throughout this episode. Like, if you had a stereotype of what you expected Married with Children to be like, this episode would do a good job of confirming those stereotypes. Basically, Al's gonna complain that nobody does anything for him. He's the breadwinner, people should be doing stuff for him. Or if not people, the dog at least. And his idea is that he's gonna train Buck to bring him his slippers when he comes home from work. Now, Al's version of training the dog is to just sort of talk to him, as if he's trying to convince a child to do something. Although eventually he does at least show the dog what he's expecting. I will say though, despite the fact that I'm ripping it for doing typical Married with Children jokes, there were definitely some goofy winners. Like Al chastising Buck for not even moving his head when he's talking to him. That the dog is just asleep on his leg. And he says that Buck must be the laziest dog in the world. Where does he get this from? And then we pan over and Peggy has just dozed off sitting next to him. But while that one works, the 500 Al's feet stink jokes tend not to. I mean, they're fine. I wasn't like angry about them, but I did feel like, okay, we get it, his feet stink. And because he made it a thing about his slippers, you know we're gonna get a lot of these jokes. And soon after this initial interaction, Bud's gonna come home. And he's coming in hot because he's got an idea of how the family should be spending their money. What does he want? He says they need a computer. Of course, Peggy, never one to shy away from money, tells Al to write him a check. To which Al says, I got a better idea. Go to the vault where we keep the gold bars and chip off as much as you need. But Al isn't just against it for the money. He's against it because, quote, computers are ruining the country. Well, computers and women. So as another example of typical Married with Children jokes, Peggy's gonna say that they're actually really similar because Al doesn't know how to turn on either one. To which Al responds, he's not interested in either one. And sometimes I wonder if Al is just a closeted gay man. Like poor Al, if he just grew up in a different time, maybe today he'd feel safe to come out. But Peggy's gonna push for the computer because Bud has the opportunity to become the first Bundy to go to college. Which Al refutes, that's not true. His uncle Edwin went to college as a cadaver for med students. And this whole time we haven't seen Kelly yet, which means we haven't gotten any Kelly's a slut or Kelly's dumb jokes. Well, buckle up because they're gonna say that Kelly could go to college too, which is Kelly's cue to come downstairs and start complaining about a remedial reading test. I mean, who cares if Jack and Jill fell down in a hall? Why were they even in the building? Typical fare, but I will say that the long pause of Bud, Peg, and Al just staring at Kelly from the couch worked for me. Then the Rhodeses come over. Why? Because they wanted to tell the Bundys that Buck is digging a hole in the backyard, I guess? There really wasn't a reason given. They just show up, but they're brought right up to speed, which is that they're told that the Bundys are gonna buy a computer. Even though when Marcy tries to confirm and asks, are you guys really buying a computer? Kelly, Bud, and Peggy are all nodding their head. Meanwhile, Al is shaking his. The problem in Al's eyes is it'll be just like when they had kids. Sure, when they're little, everyone's oohing and eyeing. But once the novelty wears off, they're just another thing that sits there, collects dust, and screams for food. I'm telling you, nobody needs kids. No, I mean a computer. That's a quote from Al. But the Rhodeses are going to extol the virtues of a computer. You can track sports scores. But Al combats that with the newspaper. They say it helps you keep track of social events, which Al combats with the TV guide. Okay, you can organize your recipes. That's when Al puts his arm lovingly around Peg's shoulders and says, "Don't eat." Now, despite Al's resistance, they all just get up and leave to go get a computer. And Al's gonna stay behind and bitch about how he's supposed to be the boss. I have to say, though, I'm a little bit on Al's side here because this feels very irresponsible of Peggy. And you know, she's not known for making responsible decisions, but this one was pretty egregious, especially when we find out how much she spent on it. Now, before they walk through the door, though, Al is still trying to train Buck to bring him his slippers. So he's gonna act it out. He puts his shoe in his mouth and crawls over to Buck. Naturally, that's when everybody walks in with a bunch of boxes in tow. They bought a $2,100 computer, which is a lot of freaking money. That's a lot of money now. How is Al supposed to afford that? Though there was some fun old tech talk here. I mean, they're really complimenting this computer here. It's top of the line with its 40 megabit hard drive. It's like impossible to imagine utilizing a computer with that little disk space now. Peg is even going to acknowledge that she doesn't know how to use a computer or why they need it, but she just knows she wants it. And so since she wants it, she's trying to put it on display. She wants it right next to the TV. Meanwhile, Al is ignored. Now we cut forward in time, and I'm not sure how far, but enough that nobody is using the computer. And concerningly, Al seems to be hallucinating that the computer is talking to him. And not just talking to him, but like really razzing him. Now, Al wants to know why nobody is using the computer. And Kelly's gonna come downstairs saying she has to do a book report on Moby Dick, which is crazy if she's having trouble with Jack and Jill. So Al suggests doing the book report on the computer. But Kelly's like, I tried. I typed in Ishmael, but you know what the computer said? It said Ishmael, and it spelled it wrong. So Al, teetering on the edge of a psychotic break, tells her to ask her brother. And then we get a storyline that we've already used, a joke we've already done. So in a previous episode, Bud gets Kelly to do a book report on Treasure Island, but all the details of it are Gilligan's Island. This time with Moby Dick, he uses all the details from Mr. Ed, which is funny, but also it's a repeat. So after Bud tricks Kelly, Al's like, why aren't you using the computer? And Bud's just basically like, I don't want to, I got a blank screen with Kelly. Meanwhile, Al's still trying to get Buck to get him his slippers because the computer told him to. Of course, he's calling for Buck, but Buck doesn't even show up. He's like, this dog is untrainable. And right after he says that, Peggy walks in the door with a bunch of shopping bags, and Buck's right in front of her, holding a bag in his mouth. And he takes it upstairs, and when she says, remember to close the door, you hear Buck close the door. But at this point, Al is adamant. Somebody needs to start using this computer. So in the next scene, Peggy and Marcy are printing something out, and Peggy's like, are you happy now, Al? And Al replies, yeah, couldn't be happier. Of course, Peggy knows he's really not, and she's gonna complain to Marcy about how she married an unhappy man. And Al's gonna be like, no, you did marry a happy man, you just turned him into me. But Al's at his wit's end. He even tries to sell the computer to Marcy, who only offers him $30 for it. She's like, it's obsolete, I wouldn't even bother with it, which is kind of crazy. Then the hallucinated computer voice starts really going in on Al. It's laughing at him and saying it's the 80s version of the Pet Rock. It's basically mocking him. Why'd the shoe salesman buy a computer? Give up? Because he's married to an idiot. But Al's gonna walk out of the room during that joke, and when he comes back in, he's holding a sledgehammer, which he then destroys the computer with. What a waste of money. Then he turns to Buck and says, let's talk about those slippers. So a scared Buck runs away and comes back with the slippers, and now Al is truly king. That's the whole episode. Let's see how it ranked.
I'll rank.
So the rankings are ranked the episode based on 5 categories: story, acting, dialogue, episode coherence, and character relatability. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. Then I have a laugh counter where I tally up the amount of times the episode made me laugh. 1 point per laugh out loud gets added to the score. But before I dive into the ratings here, I just want to say, if you're enjoying this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help me out. But without further ado, the first category is story. And there's not much to this. The family gets a computer and doesn't really use it, so Al destroys it. It's fine, but certainly not great. However, I think if you change computer to like anything of that ilk that you spend a lot of money on but don't use, like a treadmill or a Peloton bike, it works allegorically. But still, I gave it a 2.25. So that brings us to acting, and it's a ho-hum episode, but that doesn't mean it was poorly acted. Everyone was good. I gave it a 3.75. So on to dialogue. Now, it did make me laugh more than I expected, but it was still a weaker episode. It just felt like a paint by numbers type of script. Like they had a list of all the stereotypical Married with Children jokes and just kind of mad-libbed them in. I gave it a 2. So that brings us to episode coherence. So they used the exact same joke from an earlier episode with the whole book report thing. And on top of that, they have a joke where Kelly is in remedial reading, but then she's suddenly doing a book report on Moby Dick. And they don't even attempt at giving a reason for the Rhodeses to come over, or the idea that they would go with the rest of their family and not Al to buy a computer for the family. That all being said, it wasn't entirely incoherent or anything, but there were some glaring spots, so I gave it a 2.5. So that brings us to character relatability. And honestly, I find this to be a pretty relatable episode. It's not a super well done episode, and there were a lot of weak aspects, but feeling like you're not being heard and wanting something that you don't really plan on using are a couple very relatable traits. I gave it a 4.25. All right, so some mostly low scores here, so it's gonna need a pretty good laugh counter to get into the top 3 tiers. And unfortunately, it was a decent laugh counter, but not great. It got me 13 times, which puts the total at a 27.25, which makes it a mediocre. And as for the series average, it drops a little bit down to a 33.21, which means it's still in. I'd watch it again. And if you're ranking along with me, drop your score in the comments. But thanks for listening and or watching. Check out my other Married with Children ranking episodes or any of my other movie or sitcom ranking episodes on this channel. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like. For up-to-date rankings, you can check out my website at therankpodcast.com, where you can also email me at john@therankpodcast.com. And if you really want to support the show, you can become a patron at patreon.com/therankpodcast, which has been newly revamped. But I will leave you with this. Why did the computer end up feeling cold? Because Al smashed its windows.
Not bad, not bad.
He says they need a computer. What is on my face?
Your hair.